Hey, good vach. I'm going to share tonight two stories. The first story is about how Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was born. This week we're celebrating Lag BaOmer, the day of the joy of Rabbi Shimon, the day of incredible miracles and wonders, and a day that not just many miracles and wonders happen on that day, but it's a Yom Zakai. It's a day of great merit that that people wait for all year in order to ask for blessings and for good things. The different time of the Mittler Rebbe, there was oops, I fixed that. Hold on. Yeah, time of the Mittler Rebbe, people would wait all year for Lag BaOmer because the Mittler Rebbe would go out to the field and give unique blessings, and so too by our Rebbe, people would wait all year, especially for this day, to ask Rebbe for blessings, especially for children. And what's not so known is that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai himself was born through incredible miracle. This is recounted in the Sefer Nachlat Avot, and that Sefer discusses how Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was born. And I'm not sure if this is why his day of celebration is associated with blessing specifically for all wonders, but especially for blessing for children, but it may be connected. Shimon bar Yochai's father, Yochai, was a very wealthy person, very respected person, the leader of the generation. His wife's name was Sarah, and she was a grandchild of Hillel Hazaken, of the author of the Mishnah Hillel, the leader of the generation. And they were married for many years without children. And the Talmud says that in certain situations, the husband and wife should get divorced if they can't have children. And her husband, Yochai, after so many years not having children, he was thinking about this may be what he is meant to do. So his wife was very upset, and she started to fast, and she started to pray, and give tzedakah, asking Hashem that she should have a child. So came the night of Rosh Hashanah. Oh, Yosef HaTzadik. Came the night of Rosh Hashanah, and Yochai has a dream. In his dream, he sees many trees. Some trees have fruit. Some trees are barren. And while he is in this beautiful garden with all these trees, he's leaning against one tree himself. He's leaning against a tree. And the tree he's leaning on is barren. But there are many other trees around him. Some have fruit, some don't have fruit. And then he sees someone carrying water, and the person carrying water is pouring water into some of the trees. And as soon as he pours water in the trees give fruit. But when he came to his tree, he didn't just use the regular bucket of water that he had. He took out a small flask of water, and this flask of mayim chayim, of living water, he poured onto this tree that he was leaning on. And then all of a sudden his tree also gave fruit. All of a sudden it blossomed, and fruit came out of that tree as well. So he wakes up from his dream, and he tells his wife, he's very excited, very happy about the dream. As soon as he woke up, he had a verse in his tongue. He was thinking of a verse that we say in Hallel, how God takes a barren woman and makes her to become a happy mother of children. So he was thinking, like, there's also a good sign. He woke up with this verse of Torah in his lips, and he shared the dream with his wife, and he told his wife that what he feels the dream is about like this. It was in Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the time when Hashem makes a decision what's going to happen to the world. And he felt that the trees are the women. And the trees with fruit are the women who are blessed with children. And the trees without fruit are the women who are not yet blessed with children. And so he felt that the tree he was leaning on was his wife. And she wasn't blessed yet with a child, therefore the tree didn't have fruit. But then God brought a blessing to all these trees that they will give birth. And so this is a blessing he felt for his wife, that she will have a child this year. That's what he said. But he said to his wife, I'm just wondering, what's the meaning of the flask of water? In the dream, the man I saw in the dream, he poured into all the different trees water, but into my tree, he took out a flask, a different flask than the bucket he was using for everyone else. What's the meaning of that flask? So his wife said, I don't know, but let's go ask Rabbi Akiva. They went to see Rabbi Akiva. His wife said, your question is a question. Let's go see Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva has divine inspiration. Surely God will give him the spirit to be able to tell us the meaning of your dream. So he's very excited about this, and they go together to see Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said that your interpretation of the dream is correct. The trees, the water, it's all correct. The Shoshana, it's all correct. The meaning of the flask is as follows. Rabbi Akiva said, all the other trees, they were destined to give fruit. They were meant to have children. All other women were meant, they were destined to have children. However, your wife Sarah, she wasn't destined to have a child. It wasn't in the cards. It wasn't something that was going to happen organically. But because she prayed, and because she fasted, and because she gave charity, her prayers were accepted. And that's why you will be blessed with a child. That's why he took out a flask. The flask is her tears. The flask of her tears, that's what caused her tree to give fruit. So Baruch Hashem, they went home, and there are different opinions about when Rabbi Shimon was born. Some say he was born on Lag BaOmer. Some say he was born on Shavuos. Many things happened, by the way, to Rabbi Yochai on Lag BaOmer. For example, the famous story in the Gemara about how the world needed rain. They came to Rabbi Shimon to ask for a blessing for rain, and instead of praying for rain, he just said words of Torah about how beautiful it is when brothers sit together. And as soon as he said this teaching, the rain came down. So that happened also in Lag BaOmer. Many revelations of Torah and miracles happened on that day. Anyway, so they gave birth. His wife gave birth to a child, and they decided to call him Shimon. Why to call him Shimon? Because Shimon means to hear. So they called him Shimon to represent how God had heard her prayers and had blessed them with a child. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim v'rach. That's the first story I want to share tonight. Second story I want to share is about Rabbi Mordechai Gorelik, who is from Nachal Chabad, and he shared an interesting story that he had with the Rabbi Shimon Yochai of our times, of our Rebbe, and this was back in 1971, the summertime, in Tashkent, in Russia. There was no one getting at that time visas to leave Russia, but things started to change, and some people were getting accepted to be able to leave. And so at that time, his father also presented a request to leave Russia, and he was refused the first time, the second time, and the third time. So then his father wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said in response to his father that his father should travel to Alma Ata, to the resting place of the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, and there he should ask for a bracha from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, and he should say the customary book of prayers that's said by a gravesite, Ma'ina Lashon, the special prayers that are said by the resting place of a tzaddik, and certainly Hashem will send his salvation, and they should not be afraid. That's what the Rebbe said. He should travel to his father, ask for a blessing, say the special book of prayers, not to be afraid, the salvation will surely come. Their cousin, Rabbi Gershon Ber Jacobson, Olav Shalom, he sent them a picture of the Rebbe, a famous picture where the Rebbe is standing by the door of the 770, he's holding a book, and apparently this instruction came from the Rebbe. Rabbi Gershon Ber sent them this picture and told them that they should, each of them, his brothers and him and his father, they should all make copies of this picture, and they should hold this picture in their pockets when they travel to the Rebbe's father's gravesite. And they shouldn't be afraid. And so they all went together. Rabbi Chaim Eliezer, Chaim Elazar, who lived in Melbourne, I had the privilege to know he passed away already. Chaim Elazar and Shalom Ber and Mordechai all together went with their father and also their cousin Chaim Elazar Belenkin, who loved to take pictures. He took with him a camera. So they got to the ohel of the Rebbe's father, and they took many, many pictures of it. And shortly after they returned from their trip to Alma-Ata, Shalom Ber, his brother, and his family received a visa. And Mordechai and his wife also received a visa. But he said, my father and mother and my brother, Chaim Elazar, who was not yet married, they did not receive any visa. We got permission, Shalom Ber, I, Mordechai, but not Chaim Elazar, not my mom and dad. So he leaves Russia. He arrives in Israel about 52 years ago, on the 21st of Av, 1971, and immediately he wanted to prepare to see the Rebbe, to arrive by the Rebbe for Tishrei in the following year. And he worked very hard, but he wasn't able to get there in time for Rosh Hashanah. He got there right before Yom Kippur. Before Yom Kippur, he got lekach from the Rebbe, and he merited to have an audience with the Rebbe. In the audience, the Rebbe asked him a few questions: who has arrived, what are the names of your friends, and he also, of course, asked for a bracha for his father and mother and for his brother Chaim Elazar, that they should also leave Russia. The Rebbe responded, your father is still needed there. It was very hard, of course, for him to hear that, but that's what the Rebbe said, your father is still needed there. So the month of Tishrei, with all of its holidays, passes, and he again goes into the Rebbe for another audience before going back to Israel, and he gave to the Rebbe all the pictures from his visit to the Rebbe's father's gravesite. And the Rebbe took out a magnifying glass, never started looking at the pictures, and never started asking questions. There's no Jewish gravesite then in Alma-Ata. Instead, this gravesite, this cemetery rather. This cemetery was a cemetery where there were Jews and non-Jews buried there, and the Rebbe wanted to know how far was the Rebbe's father's grave from the neighboring graves. He didn't really know the answer to the many questions the Rebbe had, but then the Rebbe started looking out of the window, and he felt that the Rebbe wasn't there. The Rebbe looked out the window, and the Rebbe started to ask this man, Mordechai, the Rebbe started to ask him, what's your opinion? Do you think it's possible to bring my father's remains here to New York? Is it possible to make some kind of transfer between these two countries? Has this been done before? But the Rebbe is looking at him, but although the Rebbe is looking at him, he feels the Rebbe is not really talking to him. The Rebbe is talking to Hashem. And then, without him saying anything, the Rebbe just said to himself, sort of, Zolshem bleiben azeh. It should remain the way it is. And I want to ask you, said the Rebbe to Reb Mordechai Gerelik, I want to ask you, please tell your father that I want him to fix up the monument next to my father's ohel. So this monument was originally placed by the Rebbe's father's ohel in 1944 during the war, and apparently the people who did it weren't experts, didn't have money, and it was a bit of wasn't very nice. It wasn't made from. They had to put pieces of marble together to make this monument, and it wasn't the engraving wasn't very professional, and there's also a word that wasn't very clear, and the Rebbe gave 10 instructions of what to do for a new monument. The Rebbe said they should use a new stone, they use the same language of the original stone. They didn't put Schneerson on the Rebbe's father's grave originally because they didn't want, of course, to irk the ire of the KGB. That name, was the name of the enemy of the government. The Rebbe said they should keep the Magen David they had a Magen David on it because it was among all other non-Jewish graves, so therefore they put a Magen David to show this is a Jewish grave. They said keep the Magen David. The Rebbe said don't use screws to attach the new stone to the grave. The old stone had 4 screws, And the Rebbe said not to only use cement in the new one. And the Rebbe said make this as nice as possible, and that the one who does the engraving should be a Jew who keeps Torah mitzvahs. A Jew is Orthodox. The Rebbe also said he wants to pay for all the costs of putting up this tombstone, and therefore they should keep a record of all the costs. And then the Rebbe started pouring blessings out for this Mordechai Geluk's father and for his family, and the Rebbe blessed Mordechai and thanked him for making this effort. And this whole audience was a pretty long, relative audience. It took about 24 minutes. So he left the Rebbe's room. It was a very unique audience, and he sat down upstairs in 770 to make sure he didn't forget anything. And he was afraid there's a lot of details. He was afraid he might forget something, and so he wrote down everything. And immediately he gave the message to his father, and his father made an effort, and they found a good stone. The problem was to find an engraver who was religious. They looked for someone like this in Tashkent. There's no one who was religious who does engraving in Tashkent. There's no one who was religious in Samarkand who did this either. They tried in Moscow, in Riga, and in Leningrad. And of course, there's no faxes or WhatsApps or anything. Just trying to find someone who was Orthodox who might know how to do this. They also didn't know what to do with the old tombstone. So Rabbi Geralk's father wrote to the Rebbe about these two issues. Number one, we can't find someone religious who does engraving. Number two, we want to know what to do with the old tombstone. So 3 weeks go by, and no answer comes back from the Rebbe. And meanwhile, they found someone in Tashkent who was Orthodox. His name was Gavriel. And he said to them, I'm not really an engraver, but my father was an engraver. And I watched him, and I have all his tools. I could probably do it. I just never did it before. So they put pressure on him, and they said to him, you should know it's a very unique thing to be able to do something for a tzaddik, and it's certainly it'll be a blessing for you. So he agreed, and they made an agreement with him that every day before he starts to work, he should go to the mikveh. And Chaim Elazar took him to the mikveh every day. They had a mikveh underground. And then he would start to work. So they agreed it would take about a week to finish this job. And so he started on day one, went to mikvah, he worked, but on day two he didn't show up. He didn't show up on day 3 or day 4. And what happened was he got him very, very sick. And he said, I don't know if I can continue. He came very sick, said, I don't know if I can go on. But Rabbi Geralk said to him, you have a bracha from the Rebbe. You have to be healthy. You have to be able to continue this. So, miraculously, he got better. This shocked the doctors who took care of him. Rabbi Geralk said that he once visited the Rebbe, and there was the yearly international conference of Chabad rabbis, and he, it wasn't the one in New York. They had a conference for Chabad rabbis in Russia, in Alma-Ata, and Rabbi Geralk said he met over there his son Zusha, and a young man who's a shliach today in Vienna. And he said this shliach in Vienna is a grandson of this same Rabbi Gavriel who made the monument for the Rebbe's father's gravesite. So this grandson told Rabbi Mordechai Geralk, another detail of the story which he didn't know. He heard this directly from his grandfather Gavriel. And his grandfather said he was so sick that the doctors didn't give him any chance to survive. Because of this mitzvah, he survived with another 30 years, and he passed away about 10 years ago in Israel. And he also merited to have an audience with the Rebbe himself. And his grandson today is a shliach in Vienna. So meanwhile, the job was finished, and they needed to bring this tombstone, this monument, to Alma-Ata, and to put it up there. So this chassidim heard about this, and 15 chassidim decided to join and to go to Alma-Ata together with Chaim Elazar and together with their father and Yossi the Maitin, and they prepared workers there, and they started to try to set up this monument. Professor Branover also went there. He wanted to get a bracha from his father, also to be able to leave Russia. So they put up the monument, and they took pictures of it. And when they started to take down the old monument, it suddenly just like exploded, sort of. And they decided to just didn't know what the Rebbe wanted them to do with it, because they never got an answer from the Rebbe, so they just left it there. They just buried it inside inside in that same place. So after they fulfilled the Rebbe's request, immediately they got the visas. The Rebbe said he still needed there. As soon as they did, the Rebbe asked them to do there. Right away, they got the visas. This was in Teves, and before Purim already, they arrived. They got the visas in Teves, and before Purim, they already arrived in Israel. And his father tried to get a visa to arrive at the Rebbe's to New York for the Rebbe's birthday on the 11th of Nisan. Meanwhile, their oldest son, or Mordechai's oldest son, was born in Bezusha, the 4th of Nisan. His bris was going to be on the 11th of Nisan. He asked his father if he could stay for the bris, but his father was so excited, wanted to be by the Rebbe, so he ended up missing the bris and going to the Rebbe. And they came to Crown Heights. His father came to Crown Heights, and he stayed by his cousin, Rabbi Gershon Ber Jacobs, and he asked him, what happened? How come we never got an answer from the Rebbe? Gershon Ber said, I got an answer from the Rebbe immediately. I sent it back. I know how I didn't get it. The Rebbe responded to your two questions. The question was, you can't find an Orthodox engraver. The Rebbe said, Yagaitim Matsasa. If you will try, you will find. And the second thing you asked about the tombstone, what to do with it, the old one, the Rebbe said to bury it there. So miraculously, they didn't know what the Rebbe said, but both things happened. First of all, they found immediately this Gavriel, who was Orthodox, and he did the engraving. Number two, the tombstone, the old tombstone, broke on the spot, and they had to bury it. They decided to bury it there with the divine providence. Anyway, so the Rebbe wanted to pay for everything, and Rabbi Mendel Gorelick, who had done all this work, he wanted to make it. He didn't really feel comfortable the Rebbe was going to pay for the whole expense, but the Rebbe said, Mendel, I want the cheshbon tzedek. I want an actual, honest numbers of what it cost. Everyone to pay for it. And but as you see that the Rebbe really wanted to bring his father's remains to New York, but he decided that it should stay there in Russia. And apparently this is something that is a source of blessing for all the Jewish people who are living there. They can go to Rebbe's father's gravesite and ask for blessings. The Rebbe gave up his own desire apparently in favor of helping all the Jews there. They should have that great merit instead of him. Saying his point is that we're coming day, Rabbi Shimon Yochai, a day when those who can go to Meron, those who can go to Shimon Yochai, our Shimon Yochai to New York, those who can't, to get there somehow, to write a letter to the Rebbe, to send a letter. It's a great, great time to ask for blessings for all good things. And Shem Shach before Lag BaOmer, which is ready tonight, see the Pelishus Kerev Aretz, the Simcha, they're already celebrating in Israel Shema Yochai for a week before. The custom is, as Arizal started, to celebrate Lag BaOmer a week before Lag BaOmer. So the celebration already began. So we should merit immediately to see the real celebration, the Yeshua of Shema Yochai. I'll tell you one more story before I let you guys go. I can't hold myself in. It's such a good story. I was there. I probably shared it before. I don't know how old I was. I was a child in Worcester, Massachusetts. And my grandfather made a big parade in honor of Lag BaOmer, and it was supposed to rain on the parade. And I had this sign I was carrying with this wooden stick, which had a lot of wooden things in it that weren't getting splinters from it. I wanted to carry my sign despite the splinters, and the problem was it was going to rain. So my grandfather asked the Rebbe, "What should we do? It's going to rain on our parade." So the Rebbe said, "You could rely on Reb Shimon." I'll never forget it. I saw this all of a sudden before the parade. Skies open up. It's beautiful. And this beautiful parade. And the parade goes on, and the parade finishes. And again, right after the parade was over, then it rained after the parade was over. It was exactly like the Rebbe said, rely on Reb Shimon. And we saw this. Don't worry. No reason. The skies opened up. Beautiful parade. And then the parade is finished. Exactly after the parade finishes, then it started to rain. So we could rely on Shimon, whatever it is, the time of salvation, time of brachas, whatever each of us in our heart desires for good, we should see the fulfillment of them. And the ikar, the main thing is the innermost desire of every Jew, the coming of Mashiach, which we see happen tonight. Take me, a good davach, a freilich davach, and a freilich Lag BaOmer.